So this is based off the reading LAM 144, Framework for Use of Discount Rates in Actuarial Models. And the best way I decided to analyze this reading was actually to look at the only exam problem so far that was based on this reading, and it was Fall 2020 exam. And so we're looking at this company, and they have a block that has 100 years of monthly liability cash flows. The investment strategy is to match the asset and liability cash flows, and they want detailed information, or they have the detailed information about assets in the portfolio. And now we're going to dive into comparing and contrasting the matching principle and the budgeting principle, which one's best for this company. Honestly, I think as far as life insurance goes, you probably want to use the matching principle, usually. I'm not going to say that for most of the time. But the matching principle, the way I view it, is if I look at this, have my assets match my liabilities. And so you want to match the cash flows of your assets with the cash flows of your liabilities. What's nice about this is it's based on like what your asset portfolio is, and so your 5-year zero coupon bond or your 10-year, depending on no matter what class they are. You look at what assets you have, and then each of those time steps, what their discount rates are, and then you can present value that back. So that's what your discount rate is. So it's all different depending on the yield curve, and it's based on your portfolio. And there's actually a couple of disadvantages of this. Looking at the first bullet point here, it says we have 100 years of monthly liability cash flows. Well, likely for an insurance company, it's probably you're going to have liabilities this long, but you're not going to have assets that go on that long. And so a solution is, hey, how about I just use, for instance, my 30-year bonds, and I just use that same discount rate for all time, just for an assumption. And you know that's fine. And that's fine what you would do, but it's not perfect. It would also be really good for the second bullet point right here. The investment strategy is to match asset and liability cash flows. What's nice about it too is that you can look at the transaction costs of what it is. Maybe you have some assets in there that are pretty illiquid. You got to consider that in the transaction costs there. And so you could look at how liquid it is to make sure you could get this cash flows done. And also, it's really good for the second bullet point of the detailed information about assets in the portfolio. Like I was saying, how liquid is it? You have a detailed information about the assets per each time step. So the matching principle is really good for this. And this is what I would recommend here. And this is what they say in the SOA solution. The budgeting principle, you use that to determine how to finance or budget for your liabilities. And so let's say you were to use the budgeting principle in this problem, and maybe these 100 years of monthly liability cash flows, you have like a 50-year liability and you have a 70-year liability. And you say, okay, I need this many assets today, or I have this many assets today. How much of a yield do I need to get to meet these liabilities? Or no matter how many liabilities there are of these cash flows, you just say, hey, if I earn this much, then I can meet all of the liabilities given my assets today, or how much I'm holding today in cash, essentially. So there's a risk there, because I could just say, oh, if I earn 7%, or if I earn 20%, I can meet the liability cash flows. Well, what risk are you pitting on if you say 20% of a yield? Well, obviously you're going to put on a lot of risk, and that's you need to be careful. You need to communicate with that with management of what kind of risk you're taking on, because the budgeting principle is not going to explain it in the present value number. And so those are the type of things to consider, and I hope that helps open your mind of what the budgeting versus matching principle mean.